Hello, Kusto community. My name is Ryan Majitimer, and I'm a product manager on the Azure Synapse Analytics team. Today, I'm joined by Anshul Sharma, who's a program manager on the Azure Data Explorer team, for another episode of Azure Data Explorer 101. In this episode, we're going to be talking about the Data Ingestion Hub, and Anshul is going to tell us the different options you have for ingesting data into Azure Data Explorer. It could be files, blob storage, Event Hub, IoTHub, and the list goes on. I'm going to hand it over to Anshul. Welcome.
Thank you, Ryan. Hi, everyone. I'm Anshul Sharma. I'm a product manager in the Azure Data Explorer team. Today, we are going to talk about different data ingestion options to bring data into ADX seamlessly. ADX supports a rich variety of data formats, connectors, and pipelines for ingesting your data. At the most primitive form, ADX supports SDKs in all popular languages such as .NET, Python, Go, Node.js, and Java, which allows you to build your custom apps and pipeline. ADX also supports managed pipelines with popular Azure services such as EventHub, IoTHub, EventGrid for setting up continuous ingestion of data as and when it arrives. Then we have native connectors or plugins with popular open source technologies such as Kafka, Spark, Logstash, and Telegraph. We also support integration with orchestration or instrumentation flows such as Power Automate and Logic Apps, as well as Azure Data Factory. Lastly, we have tools and wizards to abstract the complexities of setting up these pipelines with just few clicks, which is exactly what we will see in the demo today. So we offer an experience in the form of Ingestion Wizard, which is a friction-free onboarding experience for you to bring your data into ADX. It's a four-step process when you can get your data from different sources such as Azure Data Lake, Blob, Event Hub, or even local files. The system would automatically infer the schema from the source and suggest the table and mapping that is needed for it to be created in ADX. Lastly, you can ingest this data one time or create connection for continuous data ingestion if that is what you desire. Now let's see all of this in a short demo. As you can see here, there are multiple options listed to bring data from different data sources. Now when it comes to ingestion, there are a couple of options, starting with one-time ingestion. This is where you would traditionally bring in your historical data set. Now you have an option to bring it either via local file or from blob container or even from ADLS Gen 2. So depending on where your data resides, you can configure the source accordingly and all the data would be pulled in into ADX. Now, in certain cases, you might not just want to ingest data one time, but rather set up a continuous ingestion pipeline. Like as and when the data arrives in Event Hub or IoT Hub, you might want to reflect it in ADX. Or as and when a new file arrives in ADLS Gen 2 data lake, you might want to ingest it in ADX. So for these scenarios, you have an option of setting up a continuous ingestion pipeline based on the data sources again that you desire. Now for this particular demo, let's ingest some data. So as you can see, ingest data is literally a four-step process. So the first step is wherein I'll select my cluster, database, as well as the table name. So for this particular demo, I have downloaded the archive of all my tweets from Twitter, and we are going to ingest that. So as you can see, the next step is about selecting the source. So in this case, there are multiple options for source available, which we saw. But for this particular demo, I have the data stored in a file. So we would just be selecting that file here. Now, the next step is where it gets interesting. Now, based on the data set that was provided, the system automatically inferred the data format as well as suggested a table structure which I can potentially use. So you can see at this point I have option of changing the data format to some of the other formats like ADX supports like Apache Avro or Parquet, but for this demo we would keep it as is. And also based on the suggested structure by the system, I have the liberty to go and change the data types if it's not accurate, or even add or delete a column as and when necessary. I would keep the suggestion as is because it looks good to me and just start the ingestion. Now at this point you can see the ingestion started and it has succeeded within few seconds, and there is a nice little preview window for me to look at some of the data that was ingested. Now on the bottom you can see there are also some quick queries that are suggested for me to start my analysis on top of this data. So for example, let's say if we are interested to see how many rows are ingested as part of this ingestion process, so we can just click on the suggested query. Now what's happening here is I'm being redirected to the query pane, and this is where I can continue my analysis on top of the ingested data. So on the left hand side you can see this is the cluster that we had selected for ingesting the data, and then there is a new table that has been created based on the columns that were suggested, which you can see here. Now at this point it also ran a query returning the number of rows that were ingested as part of the ingest operation, and you can see I have ingested approximately 4,000 tweets or rows from the data set. Now at this point I can perform some additional analysis on top of this data, like for example if I'm interested to know what are the tweets wherein I am talking about data. So I can just run additional queries in the query pane and it would give me the results. So you can look at the result sets here. So yeah, that is what we had planned for the demo. You saw it was pretty easy to ingest data into ADX with just few clicks.
Well, thanks, Anshul. That wraps up our video for today. Tell us in the comments, how do you ingest data into Azure Data Explorer? Do you use the Data Ingestion Hub? I would love to hear about it. Again, my name is Ryan Magitimer. You can find me on Twitter. More importantly, you can find Azure Data Explorer on Twitter, AZ Data Explorer. Like, comment, subscribe. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you on the next one.